Hello all, I'm Kathy Brown of Brown Knows Social Media, and today we're going to be talking about FDA social media changes that may affect healthcare. And I say may because we're going to be talking about some proposed draft changes that are not yet in effect. And I have with me today to talk about this David Harlow. And David Harlow is a healthcare social media attorney. He is well recognized for his vast knowledge on the subject, and he stays up to date on this, and he is the best one to tap into. He is his group is Harlow Group LLC, and he's also a national speaker on the subject. So would you like to say hello, David?
Hi, thank you for that introduction, Kathy. Welcome, everybody.
I could spend a long time introducing you on all the things that you've done and participated in with me, because you are one of my best resources for information when it comes to HIPAA and patient privacy and all of the other laws around healthcare, social media, and communications, David.
Well, thank you. There's certainly a lot to keep track of, but as I like to say, I like to practice preventive law. I'd rather help folks out in advance of getting involved in a particular effort rather than, as I used to say to some of my diagnostic imaging clients, I don't want to have to bake you a cake and bring it to you in federal prison.
I'm sure they appreciate that too.
Yeah, that's right.
So we came up on this subject because you wrote a blog post recently, and it was right around the same time that we were preparing your biweekly healthcare social media review, which is a blog carnival. And this article was something that I mentioned in my listing, and I wanted to go back to it and really come through it. And I thought if you could just introduce this, what's going on and what we're talking about, so people get an idea of what the subject of this healthcare hangout is about.
Sure. So the Food and Drug Administration about 5 years ago held a public hearing, and it was really more of a listening session than anything else, in order to get information from the community about the use of social media and what might be appropriate in terms of using social media for promotion of drugs and devices, things governed by the Food and Drug Administration. And the Food and Drug Administration has its own set of rules and requirements about publicity, about advertising, about branding, about claims, about benefits and risks, and so forth and so on for drugs and devices. And basically, much of the industry up until 5 years ago was really at a standstill, waiting for some sign from the FDA about how to be able to use these tools within the FDA framework. And no guidance was forthcoming after this listening session until draft guidance was issued just last month. And the draft guidance is sub-regulatory guidance. It's not binding on the agency. It's basically a demonstration, an explication of what the agency is currently thinking in terms of how its existing regulations apply to social media, and they're open for comment. So the comment period extends into September. So folks who are interested in this should consider preparing comments to submit to FDA, because as we'll get into in a few moments, I think that this is an interesting first step, but it really does not get us all the way there in terms of having a usable set of guidelines for social media engagement around drugs and devices.
Yeah, when I looked at the guidelines, and I thought to myself, as a social media consultant, how would I take advantage of these guidelines? I found it more of a hindrance than anything, because especially in the case of such short communications, they want a lot of stuff packed into a very small communication, and I find that very difficult to do when you can't just have links. And some other people were kind of laughing about what that's going to entail.
Right. It's very limiting, and in a sense, what the guidance means is that no, you really can't use Twitter for branded marketing of drugs and devices. Doesn't mean you can't use Twitter at all. And certainly, I think the guidance shows a certain lack of understanding or appreciation of the ways in which Twitter is used. So we don't use Twitter for broadcasting ads. That's not the highest and best use of Twitter. I mean, people do use it for that, but it can be used for so much more, and really a conversational platform. And the guidance really doesn't speak to that. The guidance, as it stands, prohibits that sort of use because you'd need basically another 140 characters in each tweet in order to include everything that FDA says you need to include in a given tweet.
So is this kind of a modern day social media version of the old ads where you would hear something on TV talking about a pharmaceutical drug, and at the end you hear this guy go at the end?
Right, exactly. Yeah, except in 140 characters, that blah, blah, blah takes up a good third or more of your tweet. So, I mean, it might be helpful now to take a look. I want to speak to a couple of the essential points in this guidance, and then maybe show a sample tweet that the FDA says is okay, and we can talk about whether this is, a useful sort of thing to be using or not. So, the draft guidance really boils down to three key points. It says that benefit information should be accurate and non-misleading and reveal material facts within each individual character space limited communication. Benefit information should be accompanied by risk information within each character limited communication. And if a firm concludes that adequate benefit and risk information as well as other required information cannot all be communicated in the same tweet or Google ad, then the firm should reconsider using that platform for the intended promotional message. So basically, you need to have accurate, non-misleading material facts. You need to have benefits and risks, and there's a couple of other things too. And what all of this together means is that it's really difficult to do this all. So what I'd like to do is to just show a sample tweet, and this is what the agency says is okay.
Okay. I think we already see your screen, so go ahead.
Are we seeing the tweet?
Oh, so, and let me say to people, if while we're talking about this, if you have questions you would like to pose to this conversation, this specifically to David, and you're watching live, go to the event page and post your questions there. I am paying attention to the event page, so I will interject your questions as we go. Go ahead, David.
Thank you. So in the middle of the page here, this is the draft guidance from FDA. In the middle of this page, they have a sort of a sample made-up drug name. So they say no focus. Excuse me. I think we actually need to drop down to another example here. Yeah. No focus. Remembering HCl for mild to moderate memory loss may cause seizures in patients with a seizure disorder. www.nofocus.com/risk. So that leaves you 6 characters for engagement with your public. This is the requirement of what you need to have, and this is for a drug that does not have a black box warning. FDA was specific in the guidance. If you had a black box warning, there's even more information you would have to include, which you really can't do in a tweet. So this is just to give you an example of what's involved there. The other example that they gave is from for another product, which they gave a made-up name of Head Hurts, Ouchafol. And this is for severe headache from traumatic brain injury. And the character counts in this example are for a Google ad. So the idea is you could put this into a Google ad, and you would need to have the common name, the scientific name, the link to the drug website, the indication, severe headache from traumatic brain injury, and then, since you have significant um, risks involved with this particular medication, you need to show the boxed warning, you need to have other warnings. This is all the blah blah stuff that you hear at the end of a TV ad, but it has to take up a lot of valuable real estate in a Google ad. So the question is, would anybody really want to run this ad? You have the name of the drug, you have a website link, you have the indication, and then you have 8 more lines about risk. And the question is whether this is appealing to anyone to use as branded advertising.
And David, before we get into whether or not this is even possible, can you give some examples of medical device? Can you translate this into an imaginary medical device message? Because Carissa just pointed out that everything seems to be addressing pharma, but not really even giving examples of medical devices. How would that look if it were a medical device, for example?
That's true. So the guidance does not give examples that are device specific, but you could imagine this being changed into a device Google ad. You'd have the uh, brand name and scientific name or generic name for the device, a link to a website, the indication, and all of these other items are things that would be generated. This is sort of off of the package insert, basically. And you have package inserts for devices as you do for drugs. If there's a black box warning, you'd have to include that first. And each of these underlined terms would be hyperlinked to specific pages that do not include any promotional information or text. So it's basically a direct link to a page of say a PDF of a package insert, whether it's a drug or a device. Same idea.
Mm-hmm. Well, I can tell you, David, that as a patient, if I were researching my options and I was looking at medical devices or I was looking at a pharmaceutical, a drug that I'm considering, and I saw that kind of information, even if that drug was the right drug for me or the right device for me, all that information about the negative would probably supersede any of the positive from my end as a patient, because we're already paranoid and scared about the things we don't know about when it comes to our health, and that just doesn't seem like it would be the best way to communicate that information.
Right, and it's not. We don't get to do this on television, so you don't get to have the image of something else going across the screen while somebody reads the blah blah disclosures in the background. So that's a problem, I think, and it does not bode well for the use of these types of communications by industry.
So when we talk about communicating through social media, and I forget what your term was, but it basically refers to it as short communication style marketing, would something like a Google Hangout, like what we're doing now, would that not fall into these guidelines, or would they?
Well, no. I mean, we're talking about text-based, short-form tweets and Google Ads, basically, or whatever the analog would be on other platforms.
Okay, so we're talking strictly about the advertising and marketing. We're not talking about engaging with people on Google Plus in communities or in Hangouts or answering questions when someone posts on a website or anything like that, right?
That's right. So it's interesting to note that while these draft guidelines are out there, the FDA has taken action with respect to a couple of companies that have acted while these guidelines are pending. So one company got a slap on the wrist for tweeting not in full compliance with the sample tweet that we just showed you. And another company was slapped on the wrist for liking a Facebook post of an individual patient who used the company's product and reported that it helped her and she felt better. It was an off-label use.
Wow, I would not expect the like to get that kind of a response, especially since that was someone else's opinion and you're simply liking what they say. That's really shocking to me.
Right. So another guidance was issued on the same day as the short form social media guidance that we've been talking about, and that is the correction of misinformation guidance. And what this guidance says is that firms, companies, producers of drugs and devices are able to go online and offer corrections to misinformation without having to comply with the full requirements of the full FDA marketing requirements. Basically, it lowers the bar for online communications if those communications are made in an effort to correct misinformation that's online. So that, I think, is a positive, because brands have shied away from all online engagement with respect to branded conversations because of concerns about the FDA marketing restrictions. And what this says is that if you're responding to misinformation, trying to set the record straight, you can do that as long as you don't get into promotional mode and marketing mode, but just correcting misinformation that's put out there by somebody else. You can do that in a more casual manner. I say casual in quotes, casual as far as the FDA is concerned. You don't have to do this in a comprehensive way. You can respond to one comment. Doesn't mean you're obligated to respond to all comments. It could be comments on your Facebook page. It could be things that you see in a patient community. It could be things that you see on another website. It could be anywhere. So I think that's one thing that's happening at the same time as these social media guidelines are coming out that is net positive.
We have a question from one of the viewers, Casey Quinlan. She asks, how do you see social media shifting pharma from its relentless sell mode into two-way dialogue? If I hear, ask your doctor about one more time, my head may explode.
So the Ask Your Doctor ads, those are called reminder ads, and those are not subject to the same requirements. Okay, so some of us are not really interested in just hearing the name of a drug or device and the call to action being, ask your doctor if it's right for you. The point there is that if you're not giving risks and benefits, if you're not touting what the thing can do, you don't have to comply with the full set of requirements. So you can get the brand name out there as long as you don't say what it does, which is sort of counterintuitive for other kinds of marketers. But what you can do, and I would say this to Casey and to others, is that what is open is unbranded communication. So, for example, some pharma companies are doing this more than others. Some pharma companies, let's say you have a hepatitis C drug in the pipeline that's about ready to come to market. Well, you can't market the drug itself online, but you can start conversations. You can host a tweet chat about hepatitis C, not mention the drug at all. The only thing that's there that connects any of that content to the company is the Twitter handle of the company. So when that drug is ready for release and distribution and advertising, there is some conversation that has been happening about that's already out there. And that is something that can be helpful both to the company in terms of long-range marketing planning, but also to patients, to have a chat about a topic that's of interest to people, creates community, and creates the sense and the not just the sense, but the reality that you're not alone. You're not dealing with this alone.
Well, Casey is giving an additional question. It's a follow-up question to her first question, and I'm going to kind of reword it because I think I know what she's saying. And she's asking, what she says is, I know that Ask Your Doctor is a separate rule set, but will that continue as more information is digital social? What I want to ask and relate to that is if you say ask your doctor, it's safe, but if you start offering a link to that information, which would actually be more complete information, that's not enough for a pharma company to do? Is that right? Or how does that work?
Right. So the link itself is not sufficient if you're making a claim in the tweet, in the short form ad. You can make a claim, you can state, this is what it's good for, but then you also have to have in the tweet itself principal side effects. So the good and the bad has to be in the tweet. It can't be available only via the link. And
So
I
now,
think a lot of folks in this space were hoping that the FDA would say, and I would have hoped and expected that the FDA might say, if it's one click away, that's good enough. If you have a link to something that clearly spells out the risks as well as the benefits, that's non-promotional in tone, then that should be good enough.
do you think that if enough people give feedback during the draft stage that we might be able to push in that direction?
It's possible. I mean, agencies have taken comments into account when finalizing rules and guidance. No guarantees here, though.
Well, John Lynn would like to know what has been the response of pharma companies to this draft guidance.
From what I've seen, the pharma companies and the agencies that work most closely with them have said, "Oh, okay, never mind. We thought we were going to get something here that we could work with, but I guess not. We'll just keep doing what we're doing." So there's some pharma companies that just stay far away from social, and there are some that are working to engage with patients in social, not in a branded way, as I said before. So you can have a chat about Hep C without talking about a drug.
So
Just as in the medical space, we have tweet chats about a particular condition. Same
yeah,
same kind of thing.
I'd like to give a hypothetical and tell me if this is in the right direction, because I see some potential here, though. As long as you can still do some unbranded marketing, would it be okay for an existing device manufacturer to have a Twitter account with their company name or some representation within the Twitter or whatever was available, and that little description of who they are, to be able to be a part of, or maybe even initiate a tweet chat about, let's say, a spinal condition, and things that may or may not have to do with medical treatment, but everything from lifestyle to pain management to everything that would also include the new device that they're getting ready to launch. Would they be able to do that and be within the safe range of these guidelines?
Well, short answer, yes to everything except for the last thing you mentioned, which is the device that they're developing or marketing. You just can't do that. That's what makes it branded.
But if you don't mention the device, if you just address the condition, and then
Correct.
people remember you were in that conversation, and then you launch the device, and they put two and two together, that's okay if you're an existing company and you're talking about something that's not brand specific?
Yes. So when I say brand, I mean the drug or device, not the company name. So an unbranded conversation can be had using the company Twitter handle.
So it sounds like we're going to be seeing more of the long discussions, whether it's the tweet chats or it's the hangouts or it's the community posts or it's the blog talk radio. I don't know that anybody would go on blog talk radio for that, but you never know. Rather than the short conversations. Do you think that this falls short? Do you think that there should be a persuasion to go in a certain direction where we're not yet? Is there something you'd like to see in the future that we're just not there yet?
Well, I think that the guidance, in a sense, misses the boat, sort of misses the essence of social media. It describes short form ads, really, rather than how social media can be used for branded conversations about pharmaceuticals and devices. I think it answers a different question than what was asked.
Has the FDA that you know of have the people that are making these decisions gone out and really become familiar with social media or talked with any of the device manufacturers or pharmaceuticals to be informed on how it could be used?
Now, what's interesting is that the FDA uses social media on its own account in a number of good and creative ways, in terms of getting out recall notices, in terms of getting out information. But for whatever reason, this is being looked at as advertising material, or the only discussion of this is framed as a discussion of advertising.
That's interesting. It almost makes me think that different people are forming these guidelines as opposed to the people that are doing the social media for FDA.
Right, it's certainly possible. There are a number of different offices within FDA, and this falls within the jurisdiction of a group of offices that are working together, and one is taking the lead.
Well, I'm going to take us a little bit off topic from pharmaceuticals and device manufacturers for just a minute and just ask the question, if we're seeing some of these updating of guidelines now with the FDA, do you see the same thing happening with, I don't know that HIP is really the right term, but some of the other guidance that it might affect hospitals and physicians and everyone else in healthcare?
Well, it's a different agency, a different rhythm, different impetus to issuing regulations. An interesting overlap is in the area of health IT, meaning electronic health records, and also sort of mobile health and health apps, that sort of thing. The FDA has jurisdiction, as do other agencies in the federal government, and there has been there's another guide for public comment now that is basically saying that the agencies are going to step back a little bit and let industry self-regulate. So this is interestingly taking the other sort of tack. It's under different statutory authority, so I understand why the outcomes can be different, even though this is originating with the same agency. But it's just kind of interesting to see that on the one hand, the FDA and other agencies are taking a much more laissez-faire approach, and in this context, they're taking a much more regulatory approach.
Okay. So I guess you sort of answered my question, because what I was really getting at was government seems to be behind the times on everything, not just the FDA, but in general. And so usually when one gear starts turning, some of the others turn. And I wondered if this was a sign that finally social media has been out and about and making noise long enough that all the different areas are starting to revisit rules and regulations and bring them up to date, because some of those rules and regulations really don't even account for true digital communication outside of FDA.
Right. I mean, well, we're always playing catch up. I mean, it would be impossible for Congress to stay current with technological developments, and that was part of the impetus to the changes in HIPAA under the HITECH Act. Even though the regulations were finalized and became effective, a year or so ago, the statute that authorized those regulations was several years older than that. It was part of the Recovery Act, and so that's sort of the latest statement that we have from Congress on this subject. So we're always dealing with stuff that's a couple years behind, at least.
Well, you said something that surprised me a minute ago. You said that even though these were proposed draft guidelines, that they were already sort of enforcing them. Did I understand you correctly?
Yes. Well, with or without these guidelines, the FDA has the authority to enforce the laws and regulations as written. So this is sort of sub-regulatory guidance. And this is sort of a keyhole view into the way FDA interprets its statutes and regulations. So with or without these guidelines, which don't bind the FDA in any way, so you couldn't point to these guidelines. If the FDA sanctioned a client of mine a year from now, I couldn't point to the guidelines and say, but the guideline says that this is okay. They say, well, that doesn't count. That's basically the value of these guidelines. It's sort of insight into what they're thinking, but it's not binding.
There's a comment on the event page I want to bring attention to. I think that the difference is how you use the word brand. So I'm going to read the question and then see if maybe there's a confusion on how we're using the term branded communication. Carissa writes, there are some that are questioning whether it's okay from the branded Twitter handle, as in, does that automatically associate the conversation with the product brand and therefore fall into branded guideline territory? Problem is, large pharma or device organizations have several brands, in some cases connecting with very different communities, and so they create their presence by brand. This may tie their hands even for the dialogue that's supposedly safe.
Yes, I would agree that that's problematic if the Twitter handle is the brand name of a drug or device. You could have a Twitter handle that is specific to a condition that incorporates the name of the pharma company, and that would not be quote-unquote branded in this sense. But once you introduce the name of the drug or device, that's branded, and then you could not necessarily be having these conversations.
So I guess the word would, for now, would be if you are a device or pharma and you have a new product coming out, don't create a branch that represents the name within the brand. So when you have your Twitter account, you don't have the product's name in your company brand, right? Just proactively.
Well, I would say, reserve that name so you can use it maybe if the winds blow differently some point in the future. But for now, yeah, I would use, company name and Hep C in the Twitter handle, but not the name of the drug.
And that's a good point, because even if you already have a company name or a division name created in a Twitter account for it, there's nothing stopping you from creating a separate Twitter account just for the purpose of interacting and having those unbranded conversations, right?
Right. Right, and as Carissa said, that's you build a community. There are people who really don't care about quarterly earnings and the other stuff that the corporate Twitter handle is going to be covering, but do care very deeply about a particular condition.
All right, so are we able to, after this Hangout is over, put on the event page the link where people can give feedback, or is that in your original blog post? Because I did share your original blog post on the event page.
Yes, the guidelines, there's links to both sets of draft guidelines, and in each there's instructions on how to submit comments.
And there is still time, right? I forget how many days you said they were taking comments.
Right, it's a 90-day comment period, so there's time through September, sometime in September, to submit comments.
So if you feel like there is a chance for changing these and getting some of those, maybe even possibly getting the links to go to the side effects and all that, and you want to have your say about it and you want to influence this would be the time to share that blog post and to tell others in your industry to give that feedback right now, right?
Absolutely. And again, It's not black or white. So yes, there's possibility for maybe some further change in the guidance, but also I think it's very important to think about the unbranded communications that can go on. Not every company makes use of those, and those that don't, I think, are missing out.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said for just offering that education. If you can educate patients to know what they should be looking for, then they can look for the products that you manufacture that meet those needs a lot better with an informed eye. There's a lot to be said for that.
Right.
Um, so we have no more comments on the event page. I think that you've totally overwhelmed everyone here.
Yeah. That's
So,
that's sometimes the lawyer's disability. Um, I would like we've spoken more about the first guidance, and I do want to give equal time to the misinformation correction guidance, because I think that really gives brands a tremendous opportunity to reach out and communicate on multiple platforms, which, as we know, in terms of a social media tactic, that's very important to not only be pushing a message on your own channels, but to propagate messages on other people's channels as well. And this is really an opportunity that brands should hold on to and use. I think there may be a tendency to brush it under the rug and say, "Oh my God, I'm going to have to read all this nonsense and respond to it." But if the the one of my favorite quotes that makes this point is the quote about um, quote of Willie Sutton. When asked why do you rob banks, he says, "Well, that's where the money is." That if you find conversations that are going on among people who are your ultimate customers, you want to be in those conversations. You don't have to wait until it's okay to create your own special conversation in your own forum. You want to get out there and use existing forums. And in this context, the opening is in the realm of correcting misinformation. And I would imagine, without having done a scientific survey, that there's a ton of misinformation out there just waiting to be corrected. So that is, as someone I know likes to say, a golden opportunity. And I think people should grab that.
so, and I'm going to put this in lay terms to make sure I'm understanding what you're saying. So if I as a company know that there are certain things that my products are accused of, for example, flu's causing, um, I forgot what it is, causing some side effect. Anyway, apparently it's Alzheimer's, right? Then I could go out and listen for those conversations and actively pursue those conversations and be able to correct those conversations without having to say all of that garbage in one small package deal, right?
Exactly. As long as you're focused on correcting the misinformation, you don't get sidetracked into a marketing pitch. It's just a focused response to the misinformation that's out there. And you just set the record straight. And you can include a link to your package insert or whatever, and that kind of information. You can't include a link to promotional microsites and things like that.
So if someone, let's talk about, let's say there's a knee replacement and it's made of, I don't know anything about knee replacements, but let's say it's made of titanium, and there's a lawsuit of those that are made from something else, and someone posts that brand that they're included in the lawsuit. Can that company come out on behalf of that brand and say, no, 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 we're not a part of that lawsuit because our knees are made from titanium, which is safer and blah, blah, to say that positive thing about that titanium, which disqualifies that statement that they're in the lawsuit? Is that okay, or is that going too far?
Right. I mean, you can distinguish it and say it also be totally factual and responding to what's been put out there. I don't know if you could go as far as to say, well, titanium is safer You could say, we're not included in that lawsuit. Our implant is made of titanium, not of steel, and studies have shown blah blah blah. And for more information, see here,
That
and
does
include a link.
that does seem like there's a lot of potential then where the focus should go is in that correcting misinformation.
Right. I think that's a tremendous opportunity, and I think in the dismay over the other guidance, that the misinformation correction guidance is getting lost in the mix.
So there is still some good to come of this. At least that part is not getting squelched. My mind is already going on ways to specifically focus in on that as far as marketing techniques. So,
Right.
so then we have, what else did you want to cover on the FDA draft? I know we've gotten through.
So that's really the core of it. That's really the key, and I think the main point is that each of these guidance documents deals with what I would say something that's one arrow in the quiver. And there are many tools at the disposal of pharma and device companies and their marketing teams. And it would be easy to focus on the negative in this one guidance and say, oh, we can't do anything. But in fact, I think there are many things that still can be done and can be done effectively. And it's a question of developing tactics that can be executed in this arena within the realm, within the scope of the statute, within the scope of the regulations and these new guidance documents.
If people want to reach out for more information to get some specific legal guidance from you, how do you suggest that they get a hold of you, David?
Sure. I am online as HealthBlog, HealthBlawg. That's my home blog and my Twitter handle. The blog and my website, harlowgroup.net, have contact information. David at harlowgroup.net.
Thank you, David. And David is always online, so I have no trouble reaching him, and he is a wealth of information, as I've said before. So thank you, David, for sharing all that you did today for today's topic, and I hope this won't be the last. We'll be able to get together with some other topics soon because you have so much more to offer.
Thank you very much. I've enjoyed this.
So this concludes our conversation on FDA social media changes that may affect healthcare, that is pharma and medical devices. I'm Kathy Brown of Brown Knows Social Media. I hope you've enjoyed and continue your conversations on the event page. I'm sure that I will respond and David will respond and we'll continue with this conversation. And feel free to follow the link and provide your own comments to the FDA before these drafts become permanent. All right. Goodbye all.